The cargo ship, Stellar Dawn, drifted through the dark void of space, its hull scarred from countless journeys between distant worlds. Captain Rodriguez checked his manifest one final time as they approached Earth's orbital station. Most of his cargo was routine: rare metals from the mining colonies, exotic spices from agricultural worlds, and technological components that kept the interstellar economy running. But there was one item that made him uncomfortable every time he looked at the shipping documents. Container 47B. Contents: one Xylorian female. Destination: Marcus Webb, New Detroit, Earth. Purpose: contractual marriage arrangement. The captain had transported many things in his 30 years of space hauling, but people, especially people being shipped like cargo, always left a bitter taste in his mouth. Still, the credits were good, and the paperwork was legitimate. The Galactic Trade Commission had approved the transaction, and everything was properly documented according to interspecies commerce laws. Down in the cargo hold, Zara pressed her face against the small porthole of her containment unit. She could see stars moving slowly past, and her heart raced, knowing they were approaching her new home. Her new prison, more accurately. The rough fabric of her travel garments scratched against her violet-tinted skin, and she pulled the worn blanket tighter around her shoulders. She had been beautiful once. On Xyloria, her silver hair had cascaded down her back like liquid moonlight, and her large amber eyes had caught the attention of many suitors. But that was before the plague swept through her home district, before her family lost everything, before desperation forced her into this arrangement. The marriage broker who had arranged her transport to Earth had painted a picture of opportunity and comfort. "Human males are wealthy," he had said with his oily smile. "They pay well for exotic wives. You'll live in luxury." What he hadn't mentioned was the journey in a cargo container barely large enough for her to stand upright, or the fact that she'd be wearing the same rough clothes for weeks. Zara's stomach growled. The nutrient paste they fed her twice a day barely sustained her, and she had lost weight during the long journey. Her once vibrant skin had dulled, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She wondered what her new husband would think when he saw her in this condition. Would he be disappointed? Would he send her back? The thought terrified her more than she cared to admit. Meanwhile, on Earth, Marcus Webb sat in his cluttered garage office, staring at the notification on his tablet. His alien bride would arrive tomorrow. The whole thing felt surreal, like something out of a bad science fiction movie. 6 months ago, he never would have imagined himself ordering a wife from another planet. But loneliness had a way of making desperate decisions seem reasonable. Marcus was 32 years old and had spent most of his adult life buried in the guts of broken machines. He owned a small repair shop in the industrial district of New Detroit, specializing in the complex hybrid engines that powered everything from hover cars to atmospheric shuttles. His hands were permanently stained with grease, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd worn anything nicer than work clothes. Women on Earth found him difficult. He was too quiet, too focused on his work, too comfortable with silence. His few attempts at dating had ended with complaints that he was boring, that he never talked about anything but engines and repair schedules. After his last girlfriend left him for a marketing executive who drove a new luxury hover car, Marcus had given up on finding someone who could accept his simple life. The marriage broker's advertisement had appeared on his tablet during a particularly lonely evening. "Find your perfect match among the stars," it had promised. "Alien women seeking stable human partners for mutually beneficial arrangements." The price was steep, nearly all of his savings, but the broker assured him that Xylorian females were loyal, gentle, and would appreciate a hard-working man. Marcus had seen a single photograph of Zara during the application process. Even in the formal portrait, her beauty had been breathtaking. Her alien features were exotic but somehow familiar, and her amber eyes held an intelligence that intrigued him. The broker had described her as coming from a good family, educated and cultured. What the broker hadn't mentioned was that she was essentially a refugee, sold into marriage to escape poverty. As he locked up his shop that evening, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and terror. Tomorrow, a living being would be delivered to him like a package, and somehow they were supposed to build a life together. He had prepared the small apartment above his shop as best he could, buying new furniture and even attempting to decorate. But he had no idea how to be a husband, especially to someone from an entirely different world. The Stellar Dawn docked at Luna Station the following morning. Captain Rodriguez personally oversaw the transfer of Container 47B to the Earth shuttle, his conscience nagging at him as dock workers loaded the unit with mechanical efficiency. Inside, Zara felt the artificial gravity shift and knew her journey was nearly over. The shuttle ride to Earth's surface took 2 hours. Zara had never seen a planet from space before. Xyloria had been her entire universe until now. Earth appeared as a blue and green marble against the black of space, beautiful and alien and terrifying. She pressed her hands against the container walls and whispered a prayer to the old gods of her homeland, hoping they could hear her across the vast distance of space. The shuttle landed at New Detroit Spaceport with a gentle thud. Through her porthole, Zara could see a gray concrete landscape stretching toward a horizon filled with towering structures. Everything looked hard and angular, so different from the flowing organic architecture of Xylorian cities. The air smelled strange, too, metallic and heavy with unfamiliar chemicals. A dock worker's voice echoed through the cargo bay. Container 47B scheduled for pickup by Marcus Webb. Where do you want this one? Zara's heart pounded. This was it. After weeks of travel, she was about to meet the man who had purchased her services as a wife. Marcus arrived at the spaceport in his ancient hover truck, its engine making the familiar whine that indicated the quantum stabilizers needed adjustment. He had changed into his least stained shirt and even attempted to comb his unruly brown hair, but he still looked like what he was, a working man who spent his days fixing things. The shipping clerk handed him a tablet to sign and pointed toward a large metal container sitting on the loading dock. Your delivery, Mr. Webb. Just tap the release code here and the container will open. The clerk's tone was casual, as if he were delivering furniture instead of a sentient being. Marcus approached the container with trembling hands. There was a small communication panel on the side, and he hesitated before pressing the intercom button. Hello? He said, his voice cracking slightly. I'm Marcus. Are you okay in there? Zara's voice came through the speaker, accented with the musical tones of her native language but speaking clear English. I am well enough. May I come out now? The container is very small? Yes, of course. I'm sorry, I should have opened it immediately. Marcus entered the release code and the container's door hissed open. The first thing he noticed was the smell. Not unpleasant, but definitely alien. Musky and sweet, with undertones he couldn't identify. Then Zara stepped out, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. She was nothing like the photograph. Where the image had shown a poised, beautiful woman in elegant clothing, reality presented him with someone who looked like she had been through an ordeal. Her silver hair was tangled and dull. Her clothes were little more than rough rags, and she was thin, too thin. But her amber eyes were exactly as he remembered, large and intelligent, and currently filled with uncertainty. Hello, Zara said softly, looking up at him. Marcus was taller than she had expected, with kind brown eyes and hands that looked strong despite their gentleness. He wasn't handsome in the classical sense, but there was something solid and trustworthy about him that she found oddly comforting. Hi, Marcus replied, acutely aware that several dock workers were watching them with barely concealed curiosity. "I'm sorry, this is awkward. Would you like to get something to eat? You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." Zara's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I would very much like that," she admitted. "The food during transport was not adequate." Marcus felt a surge of anger toward the shipping company, but pushed it down. What mattered now was taking care of Zara. "Come on, let's get you out of here. My truck isn't much to look at, but it runs well." As they walked toward his vehicle, Marcus noticed how Zara moved, gracefully, despite her obvious exhaustion, with a fluid quality that reminded him of water flowing around obstacles. Her alien nature was subtle but unmistakable in the way she observed everything around her with intense focus, as if cataloging details of this new world. "Is this your first time on Earth?" Marcus asked, as he helped her into the passenger seat of his truck. "Yes," Zara replied, running her fingers over the worn but clean upholstery. "Everything is so angular, and the air tastes of metal." "You get used to it," Marcus said, then immediately felt foolish. Of course she would have to get used to it. This was her home now, whether she liked it or not. "I mean, I'm sure it's different from your planet. I've never been off Earth myself." They drove through the industrial district toward Marcus's shop, passing factories and warehouses that belched steam into the gray afternoon sky. Zara watched everything with wide eyes, occasionally asking questions about the hovering vehicles or the massive construction robots that move materials between buildings. "It's all so busy," she observed. "On Xyloria, our cities grew more slowly, more organically. This feels like everything was built very quickly." "New Detroit was constructed in about 20 years, Marcus explained, pleased that she seemed interested rather than horrified. "It's a planned city, designed for maximum efficiency. Not very pretty, but it works." They stopped at a small restaurant that Marcus knew served decent food without too many questions about unusual customers. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, had seen enough interspecies couples over the years to remain unruffled by Zara's appearance. "Table for two?" Mrs. Chen asked with a warm smile. "I have a nice quiet booth in the back." As they settled into the worn vinyl seating, Marcus found himself studying Zara more carefully. Despite her obvious exhaustion and the poor quality of her clothes, there was an elegance about her that spoke of good breeding and education. The way she held her hands, the careful precision of her movements, she had clearly been raised in a cultured household. "What was your life like on Xyloria?" Marcus asked as they waited for their food. "The broker didn't tell me much about your background." Zara was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded on the table. "My family owned orchards," she said finally. "We grew crystalline fruits that sang when the wind passed through them. It was beautiful work, tending the groves, listening to their music. But then the blight came, and within a season, everything was dead. The silence was unbearable." She looked up at him with eyes that held old pain. "My father borrowed heavily to try to save the orchards, but it was too late. When the creditors came, they took everything. My parents, they couldn't bear to watch me starve. The marriage broker offered them enough money to start over in a new district." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't know. The broker made it sound like you were choosing to come here for adventure." "Perhaps I was, in a way," Zara replied with a sad smile. "Sometimes desperation and adventure look very similar from the outside." Their food arrived, simple but hearty fare that made Zara's eyes widen with genuine pleasure. She ate slowly at first, as if afraid the meal might disappear, then with increasing enthusiasm as she realized Marcus wasn't going to rush her. "This is wonderful," she said between bites. "I had forgotten what real food tasted like." Marcus watched her eat and felt an unexpected protectiveness rising in his chest. This wasn't what he had expected when he paid for an alien bride. He had imagined someone exotic but comfortable, someone who had chosen Earth as a desirable destination. Instead, he found himself sitting across from a refugee who had been shipped to him like cargo, wearing rags and bearing the emotional scars of loss and displacement. "What happens now?" Zara asked when she had finished eating. Her amber eyes met his directly, and Marcus saw courage there despite her obvious vulnerability. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I mean, legally, you're my wife. The papers were filed before your transport. But I don't want you to feel trapped. If you want to leave, if you want to try to make your own way here, I won't stop you. I have some money saved. I could help you get started." Zara stared at him in surprise. "You would do that?" "But you paid for me to be here. The broker said the contract was binding." "The broker said a lot of things that turned out to be lies," Marcus replied grimly. "I paid for a wife, but I didn't pay for a slave. There's a difference." For the first time since stepping out of the container, Zara smiled genuinely. It transformed her face, making her alien beauty suddenly radiant despite her exhaustion. "You are not what I expected either," she said softly. "What did you expect?" "Someone harder, cruder." The broker described human men as demanding. He said they bought alien wives because they wanted something exotic and submissive. She tilted her head, studying Marcus with new interest. "You seem neither demanding nor particularly interested in submission." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I just wanted someone who might understand what it's like to be an outsider, someone who wouldn't judge me for being quiet or simple. I guess I thought maybe someone from another world might appreciate a different perspective." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in thought. Finally, Zara spoke again. "I would like to try," she said. "To be your wife, I mean. Not because I have no choice, but because I think perhaps we might understand each other." Marcus felt relief flood through him. "I'd like that too," he said. "But let's start slowly. Get to know each other. And first, let's get you some proper clothes and a decent place to sleep." As they left the restaurant, Zara stumbled slightly, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. Without thinking, Marcus offered his arm for support, and she accepted it gratefully. Her skin was warm despite its alien hue, and he could feel the delicate strength in her frame. "Your shop," Zara said as they approached the building that would be her new home. "What do you repair there?" "Engines mostly. Hover cars, atmospheric shuttles, industrial equipment. Anything with quantum mechanics that needs fixing." Marcus paused at the entrance, suddenly self-conscious about his modest establishment. "It's not much, but it's honest work." Zara looked up at the simple storefront with its hand-painted sign reading Webb's Repair Service and nodded approvingly. "My grandfather was a craftsman," she said. "He used to tell me that work done with the hands and heart was the most noble calling. I think he would have liked you." As Marcus unlocked the door and led her inside, past workbenches covered with carefully organized tools and partially disassembled engines, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. This strange, kind human man, with his gentle eyes and honest work, might just be the anchor she needed to rebuild her life among the stars. 3 weeks had passed since Zara's arrival, and the small apartment above Marcus's repair shop had begun to feel like home. The morning sun streamed through the windows as Zara stood in front of the mirror, brushing her silver hair that had regained much of its original luster thanks to proper nutrition and care. The simple earth clothes Marcus had bought her, soft cotton shirts and comfortable pants, felt luxurious compared to the rags she had arrived in. Downstairs, she could hear the familiar sounds of Marcus working on an engine. The rhythmic clank of tools and his occasional muttered conversations with stubborn machinery had become comforting background music to her new life. She had learned to identify different problems by the sounds he made: frustrated sighs for electrical issues, satisfied grunts when hydraulics responded properly, and the slight whistle he unconsciously made when concentrating on delicate calibrations. Zara had been surprised to discover how much she enjoyed watching Marcus work. On Xyloria, mechanical repair was considered crude labor, but there was an artistry to the way Marcus approached each problem. His hands, permanently stained with grease and oil, moved with surgical precision as he diagnosed issues and crafted solutions. He never forced anything, never used brute strength when finesse would work better. "It's like he speaks their language," she had written in the journal Marcus had given her, encouraging her to document her thoughts about Earth culture. "He listens to what each machine is trying to tell him, and then he helps it remember how to work properly." This morning was different, though. Today, Zara was going to help in the shop for the first time. She had been asking Marcus for days to let her learn about his work, partly out of genuine curiosity, and partly because she was growing restless with no purpose. On Xyloria, everyone contributed to their household's prosperity, and sitting idle while Marcus worked felt wrong to her. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked as she descended the narrow stairs to the shop floor. "It's pretty dirty work, and some of the chemicals can be harsh on skin." "I am certain," Zara replied firmly. "Besides, Xylorian skin is more resilient than human skin. We evolved in a harsher environment than Earth." She rolled up her sleeves, revealing the subtle, iridescent quality of her violet-tinted skin. "What would you like me to learn first?" Marcus considered for a moment, then gestured toward a hover car with its engine bay open. "Mrs. Patterson's car has been making a grinding noise when she accelerates. Want to help me figure out what's wrong?" For the next hour, Marcus guided Zara through the diagnostic process. She proved to be a quick learner, her alien perspective sometimes offering insights that his Earth-trained mind missed. Where Marcus saw familiar patterns, Zara saw energy flows and harmonic relationships that reminded her of the crystalline fruit trees she had once tended. "The quantum resonator," she said suddenly, pointing to a component deep in the engine bay. "It's singing off-key." Marcus paused, then listened carefully to the engine's idle. There was indeed a subtle harmonic distortion that he had been subconsciously noting but hadn't consciously identified. "You're right," he said with amazement. "How did you hear that so quickly?" "Crystalline fruits sing when they're healthy," Zara explained, her hands moving confidently among the engine components, despite her limited experience. "When they're sick or dying, their songs become discordant. This machine is trying to sing, but one voice is wrong. They work together to replace the failing resonator, Zara holding tools and components while Marcus performed the actual repairs. She asked intelligent questions about the principles behind each system, and Marcus found himself explaining not just the how, but the why of engine operation. "On Xyloria, we had machines too," Zara said as they cleaned up afterward. "But they were grown rather than built. Living metal that could repair itself, crystal circuits that processed information like neural networks. Very different approach, but perhaps not so different in principle." "That sounds amazing," Marcus said, genuinely fascinated. "Do you miss it? The technology, I mean?" Zara was quiet for a moment, her amber eyes distant. "I miss many things about my home world, but technology is just tools, and tools adapt to need. Your machines here, they're designed for a different environment, different purposes. There's beauty in that, too." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jake Morrison, Marcus's oldest friend and the owner of the auto parts store down the street. Jake was everything Marcus wasn't: loud, outgoing, and perpetually curious about everyone's business. He had been dying to meet Zara since learning about her arrival. So this is the famous alien bride, Jake said with a grin that was friendly but tinged with the kind of curiosity reserved for exotic animals at a zoo. Marcus has been keeping you all to himself. Zara studied Jake with the careful attention she gave to all new humans, trying to read the complex social signals that Earth people used to communicate. She had learned that humans often said one thing while meaning another, and their facial expressions could convey multiple messages simultaneously. "I am Zara," she said simply, offering the slight bow that was polite greeting on her homeworld. "Marcus speaks of you often. You are a good friend to him." "Well, aren't you just the sweetest thing?" Jake replied, though his tone carried undertones that made Marcus tense slightly. "Pretty exotic looking, too. I bet you're quite the conversation piece at parties." "I do not attend parties," Zara said, either missing or ignoring the slight edge in Jake's comment. "I am still learning Earth social customs." "Speaking of which," Jake continued, "there's been some talk around the neighborhood. People are curious about you two, how you met, whether it's a real marriage or just, a business arrangement." Marcus felt his jaw clench. "It's nobody's business but ours, Jake." "Hey, I'm just saying." Jake raised his hands defensively. "People talk, especially when someone suddenly shows up with an alien mail-order bride. Some folks think it's romantic, others think it's kind of weird. Just thought you should know what you're dealing with." Zara looked between the two men, sensing the tension, but not fully understanding its source. "Is there something wrong with our marriage?" she asked Marcus directly. "Have I done something that brings you shame?" "No," Marcus said firmly, shooting a warning glance at Jake. "You haven't done anything wrong. Some people just need to mind their own business." After Jake left, the comfortable atmosphere in the shop felt strained. Zara helped Marcus finish Mrs. Patterson's car in relative silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't until they were cleaning up for lunch that Zara finally spoke. "The marriage broker explained Earth customs to me before I left Xyloria," she said quietly. "He told me that human marriages based on practical arrangements were common throughout your history. But perhaps that is no longer true?" Marcus set down his tools and faced her directly. "It's complicated," he said. "Some people think marriage should only be about love. Others understand that partnerships can be built on mutual respect and shared goals. The truth is, most people don't know what to think about interspecies relationships, period." "And what do you think?" Zara asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "I think what matters is how we treat each other, not what other people think about it. And I think we're becoming friends, real friends. That's more than a lot of married couples can say." Zara smiled at that, the expression lighting up her alien features. "I agree. On Xyloria, the best marriages were partnerships first, romance second. Love built slowly, like trust, from shared experiences and mutual respect." That afternoon, they worked together on a complex atmospheric shuttle engine that had been giving Marcus problems for days. Zara's unique perspective on energy flows and her growing mechanical knowledge combined with Marcus's experience to solve issues that had been frustrating him for weeks. "You're a natural at this," Marcus said as they completed a particularly tricky calibration. "Have you ever thought about making it official? Learning enough to become a certified repair technician?" Zara looked up from the component she was testing, surprise evident on her face. "Is that possible? For someone like me?" "Why wouldn't it be? You're intelligent. You have good instincts for the work and you're learning fast. There are certification programs at the technical college. It would take some time, but you could build your own career if you wanted to." The idea clearly excited Zara. "I would like that very much. To have useful work, to contribute to our household income. On Xyloria, I manage the family orchards. I miss having responsibility, purpose beyond just..." existing. Then let's look into it, Marcus said. I can teach you the basics, and you can enroll in formal classes to get the credentials you'd need. As they closed up the shop that evening, Zara reflected on how much her life had changed in just 3 weeks. She had arrived as cargo, a desperate refugee sold into marriage to escape poverty. Now she was learning valuable skills, making plans for her future, and slowly building a partnership with a man who treated her as an equal rather than property. The apartment upstairs had become truly comfortable. Marcus had given her space to add her own touches, crystals from Xyloria that she used for meditation, fabric in the flowing patterns she preferred, and books about Earth culture and technology that she studied voraciously. They had settled into a routine of separate bedrooms, but shared meals, conversation, and increasingly shared work. That night, as they sat down to dinner, a fusion of Earth ingredients prepared using Xylorian cooking techniques that Zara had been teaching Marcus, they talked about her potential enrollment in technical school. The classes start next month, Marcus said, reviewing the information they had downloaded. It's a 2-year program, but you can work part-time while studying. The shop is doing well enough that we could manage the tuition. You would really invest in my education? Zara asked. Even though we have only known each other for such a short time? It's not just an investment in you, Marcus replied. It's an investment in us, in our partnership. Besides, I've seen how you work. You're going to be good at this. Probably better than me in some ways. Zara reached across the table and placed her hand over his, the first time she had initiated physical contact between them. Marcus looked down at their joined hands, noting how her violet-tinted skin complemented his own weathered tan, how her delicate fingers seemed to fit naturally with his broader ones. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing me as more than what I was when I arrived, for helping me become who I could be." Marcus turned his hand palm up to properly hold hers. "Thank you for trusting me with who you're becoming." They sat like that for a while, hands joined across the simple wooden table, both of them recognizing that something had shifted in their relationship. They were no longer strangers bound by a contract, no longer a desperate refugee and her reluctant benefactor. They were partners, building something together that was uniquely theirs. Later that evening, as Zara prepared for bed, she looked out the window at the lights of New Detroit, stretching toward the horizon. The city that had seemed so harsh and angular when she first arrived now felt like home. The metal and concrete landscape was beginning to make sense to her, and she was starting to understand the beauty in its efficient functionality. In the bathroom, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and smiled at what she saw. The hollow-cheeked refugee was gone, replaced by someone who looked healthy, confident, and purposeful. Her amber eyes held hope now instead of desperation, and her silver hair had regained its lustrous flow. She thought about Marcus, probably reading technical manuals in his bedroom as he did every night. He was such a steady presence in her life, never demanding more than she was ready to give, always encouraging her to grow and learn. She had expected Earth marriage to be about submission and servitude, but instead she had found partnership and respect. Tomorrow she would start the process of enrolling in technical school. She would begin building a career, establishing herself as more than just Marcus's alien wife. The thought filled her with excitement and determination. As she settled into bed, Zara whispered a prayer of gratitude to the old gods of Xyloria. She had been sent away from her homeworld as a last resort, shipped like cargo to an uncertain fate. But somehow, in this industrial city on an alien world, she was discovering who she truly was. And she was discovering that love might indeed be possible, not the desperate passion of romance novels, but the steady, growing warmth of two compatible souls building a life together. In the next room, Marcus lay awake thinking about the same thing. When he had paid for an alien bride, He had expected someone to fill the loneliness in his life. Instead, he had found someone who challenged him to be better, who brought new perspectives to his work, who was becoming essential to his daily happiness. 3 weeks ago, Zara had been a stranger shipped to him in rags. Now she was his partner, his student, and increasingly, his closest friend. And Marcus was beginning to realize that friendship might just be the best foundation for love he could have asked for. 6 months had passed since Zara's arrival on Earth, and the small repair shop that had once been Marcus's solitary domain now hummed with the energy of true partnership. Zara had not only completed her first semester at technical school with top marks, but had also become an invaluable part of the business. Her unique approach to engine diagnostics, treating machines as living entities with their own forms of communication, had attracted attention from customers throughout New Detroit. Webb's repair service had quietly become Webb and Zara Repair Service, though the official paperwork still showed Marcus as the sole proprietor. That would change soon, as Zara was studying for her business certification alongside her technical credentials. The morning sun filtered through the shop's windows as Zara worked on a complex industrial mixer that had been baffling repair technicians across the city. The machine was used in a food processing plant, and its quantum-assisted blending systems had developed an intermittent fault that no one could track down. "Tell me what you're feeling," Zara murmured to the machine, her hands pressed against its housing. It was a technique that had seemed strange to Marcus at first, but he had learned to trust her unconventional methods when conventional diagnostics failed. Marcus watched from across the shop as Zara worked, still amazed by the transformation she had undergone. The thin, desperate refugee who had stepped out of a shipping container was now a confident, capable woman who moved through the shop with quiet authority. Her silver hair was styled in a practical braid that kept it away from machinery, and her work clothes were crisp and professional. But it was the change in her eyes that struck him most. Where once there had been fear and uncertainty, now there was determination and joy. "There," Zara said suddenly, pointing to a specific component buried deep in the mixer's housing. "The tertiary phase modulator is creating microfractures in its quantum field. They're so small they only appear under specific load conditions, which is why the fault seems random." Marcus joined her at the machine and ran his scanner over the indicated component. Sure enough, the readings confirmed her diagnosis. "How do you do that?" he asked, shaking his head in wonder. "I've been working on machines for 15 years. And I never would have thought to look there." "Different perspective," Zara said with a smile that made Marcus's heart skip in a way it had been doing more frequently lately. "On Xyloria, we learned that everything has its own form of consciousness, even things you would consider inanimate. Machines want to work properly, they're just sometimes confused about how." As they began the delicate process of replacing the faulty component, their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Coleman from the Interspecies Commerce Commission. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Official visits were rarely good news, especially for businesses operating on the margins of interspecies trade regulations. "Mr. Webb, Ms. Zara," Coleman said formally, checking his tablet as he entered the shop. "I'm here to conduct a routine inspection of your establishment as it relates to your interspecies marriage contract." Zara's hand tightened slightly on her tools, but her expression remained calm. "Is there a problem, Inspector?" "That's what I'm here to determine," Coleman replied, his tone neutral but carrying an underlying edge. "There have been some questions raised about the nature of your arrangement. Anonymous reports suggesting that this might not be a legitimate marriage." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Webb. I'm investigating reports that your wife may be working without proper authorization, that your marriage may be a sham designed to circumvent labor laws, and that Ms. Zara may be in violation of her immigration status. The inspector spent the next hour examining their business records, their living arrangements, and conducting separate interviews with both Marcus and Zara. His questions were invasive and often personal, designed to catch inconsistencies that might indicate a fraudulent relationship. "How would you describe your relationship?" Coleman asked Zara during her interview. "We are partners," Zara replied carefully. "We work together, we support each other, and we are building a life together." "But is it a romantic relationship? Do you share a bed? Do you love each other in the way married couples typically do?" Zara was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. "Inspector, I believe you are asking whether our marriage conforms to your expectations of what a human marriage should be. But I am not human, and our relationship has developed according to its own nature rather than your cultural templates." "That's not really an answer, Ms. Zara." "It is the only answer I can give honestly," she replied with dignity. "Marcus and I care deeply for each other. We trust each other completely, and we are committed to our shared future. If that is not marriage, then perhaps your definition is too narrow." Meanwhile, Marcus was facing similar questions in the shop office. "You paid a substantial sum for an alien bride," Coleman was saying. "Some would say that makes Ms. Zara more of an indentured servant than a wife." "Some people would say a lot of things," Marcus replied tersely. "Zara is free to leave any time she wants. She's building her own career, managing her own money, making her own choices. That's not servitude." "But do you love her, Mr. Webb? Is this a marriage based on genuine affection, or simply a business arrangement?" Marcus stared at the inspector for a long moment, realizing that he was being forced to confront feelings he had been careful not to examine too closely. "I don't know what love is supposed to feel like," he said finally. "I know that I look forward to seeing her every morning. I know that I'm proud of her accomplishments. I know that the thought of her being unhappy or leaving makes me feel sick. I know that she's made my life better in every possible way. If that's not love, then I don't understand the word." After Coleman left, promising to file his report within a week, Marcus and Zara found themselves sitting in their apartment kitchen, both emotionally drained from the interrogation. "Will they send me away?" Zara asked quietly. "I won't let them," Marcus said firmly. "We'll fight it if we have to. Get a lawyer. Appeal to higher authorities. You belong here now. You're not some refugee to be shipped around anymore." Zara looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Marcus, the inspector asked me if I loved you." "He asked me the same thing," Marcus admitted. "What did you tell him?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, then decided on honesty. "I told him I didn't know what love was supposed to feel like, but that you had become essential to my happiness." "I told him something similar," Zara said softly, "but I have been thinking about his question." "Do you know what love meant on Xyloria?" "What?" "It was described as finding someone whose song harmonized perfectly with your own. Someone whose presence made your life more beautiful, more complete. Someone you would choose again and again, even if circumstances were different." She reached across the table and took his hand, as had become their habit during serious conversations. "I think I have been in love with you for weeks now, but I was afraid to name it because it felt so different from what I expected love to be." Marcus felt his heart race. "Different how?" "Quieter, steadier, based on who we actually are rather than who we pretend to be. When I first arrived, I was so desperate to be wanted that I would have pretended to be anyone you desired. But you never asked me to pretend. You just let me be myself. And somehow yourself was exactly what I needed." Marcus turned his hand to properly hold hers, marveling again at how right the gesture felt. "I think I fell in love with you the first day," he said. "When you stepped out of that container looking like you'd been through hell, but still had the courage to trust a stranger, when you ate that first meal like it was the best thing you'd ever tasted, when you looked at my shabby little shop and saw possibility instead of disappointment. And now? Zara asked. Now I love the sound of you working in the shop. I love watching you figure out problems that stump me. I love the way you hum while you cook, and how you curl up with your technical manuals like they're poetry. I love that you're building your own life here, not just fitting into mine. They sat in silence for a moment. Hands joined, both of them processing the admission they had just made. The inspector wanted to know if we share a bed, Zara said eventually, a slight smile playing at her lips. That's really none of his business, Marcus replied, but he felt heat rising in his cheeks. No, it is not, Zara agreed, but it might be our business. The next morning, they worked together with a new energy, both of them hyper-aware of the other's presence, but in a pleasant, anticipatory way, rather than the awkward tension Marcus had expected. They had crossed a line the night before, admitting feelings they had both been carefully not examining, and somehow it had made everything easier rather than more complicated. When Jake Morrison stopped by around noon, he immediately noticed the change. You two seem different today, he observed. More couple-like. We had some revelations last night, Marcus said simply. About time. Jake grinned. I was wondering how long you were going to pretend you weren't crazy about each other. Even I could see it, and I'm terrible at reading people. That afternoon brought their best customer, Dr. Sarah Chen, who managed the atmospheric shuttle fleet for New Detroit's medical center. She had been bringing her most challenging repair problems to Marcus for years, but lately she had been specifically requesting Zara's input on the more complex issues. I have something that might interest you both, Dr. Chen said as they examined her latest problem shuttle. The medical center is expanding our interplanetary transport capacity. We need someone to manage the maintenance program for our new deep space medical vessels. She looked meaningfully at Zara. The position requires both technical expertise and the ability to work with hybrid human-alien technologies. It would mean training on some of the most advanced medical equipment in the sector and eventually traveling to establish satellite repair facilities on colony worlds. Zara's eyes widened with excitement. That sounds incredible, but I am still just a student. You're a student with natural talent and unique perspective, Dr. Chen corrected. Plus, you'd have the best teacher in the sector. She nodded toward Marcus. We'd want both of you, actually, as a team. After Dr. Chen left, Marcus and Zara stood in their shop, looking at each other with wonder. In one day, they had acknowledged their love for each other and been offered the opportunity of a lifetime. It would mean leaving New Detroit, Marcus said, traveling to other worlds, working with technologies we've never seen before. Does that frighten you? Zara asked. Terrify me, Marcus admitted, and excite me more than anything ever has. A week later, Inspector Coleman returned with his official report. Marcus and Zara waited nervously as he reviewed his findings. Based on my investigation, Coleman said formally, I find that your marriage appears to be genuine, built on mutual respect, shared interests, and what appears to be genuine affection. Miss Zara's immigration status is legitimate, and her work authorization is properly documented. He paused, then smiled slightly. For what it's worth, you two have one of the healthiest relationships I've seen in my years of conducting these inspections. Marriage doesn't have to look the same for everyone to be real. 3 months later, Marcus and Zara stood on the observation deck of the starship Medical Pioneer, watching Earth shrink behind them as they traveled toward their first assignment on the colony world of Nova Haven. Zara wore the crisp uniform of a senior maintenance specialist, while Marcus bore the insignia of a chief technical advisor. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked, as they watched the stars wheel slowly past the viewport. Leaving everything you knew on Xyloria? Coming to Earth, ending up married to a grease monkey from New Detroit? Zara leaned against his shoulder, marveling as she always did at how perfectly she fit against his side. "I regret nothing," she said firmly. "The broker who shipped me to Earth as cargo thought he was selling my future. Instead, he delivered me to exactly where I was supposed to be. Even though I'm not the wealthy husband you were promised." "Marcus," Zara said, turning to face him fully. "I was promised comfort and security. Instead, I found partnership and purpose and love. The broker could never have delivered what you have given me, because he never understood what I actually needed." Marcus pulled her closer, still amazed that this extraordinary woman had chosen him. "What did you need?" "Someone who would see me as I truly am, not as what I appeared to be when I arrived. Someone who would help me become who I was meant to be, rather than trying to shape me into who they wanted me to be. Someone whose song would harmonize with mine." They stood together in comfortable silence. Two souls from different worlds who had found in each other exactly what they had been searching for without knowing it. Behind them, Earth continued to shrink until it was just another point of light among the stars. Ahead of them lay adventure, challenge, and a future they would build together. "I love you," Marcus said quietly, words that still felt miraculous on his lips. "And I love you," Zara replied, the phrase carrying the weight of everything they had overcome and everything they were building together. In the ship's cargo hold, the containers were packed with supplies for the colony world, medical equipment, spare parts, and the tools they would need to establish a new repair facility. But unlike the cargo container that had brought Zara to Earth, these containers carried hope and possibility rather than desperation. The alien bride who had been shipped in rags had found her true home not in a place, but in the heart of a man who had looked past her circumstances to see her potential. And the lonely mechanic who had thought he was buying companionship had instead discovered love, partnership, and a future more amazing than anything he could have imagined. Together, they headed toward the stars, their separate songs having merged into a harmony that would carry them through whatever adventures awaited among the distant worlds of the galaxy.